back. Well, yes, indeed, reviewing some of those comments and then proffering solutions to ensuring that we have a better economy. Two gentlemen will join us here in Lagos and Abuja. Segun Ajibola, Professor of Economics, Babcock University, Ogun State, joins us here today. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming today. Well, you must have listened to the CBN, his perspectives there, because everyone in that economy, everyone, as a matter of fact, wants to see an improved economy. I don't know who doesn't. But from what you heard of the CBN, in that his speech with the at the CIBN, so do you think that, first of all, he sends the right kind of message to people? How do you think people internalize that?
Yes, the governor of Central Bank was the guest. In fact, we call him the host, because it was our function. Secretaries of Bankers of Nigeria. I happen to be the past president of the Secretaries of Bankers of Nigeria. So I was there live, and I listened to Dr. Kaduso from beginning to the end. You will agree with me that there is a myriad of problems confronting the economy of Nigeria at the moment, arising from global challenges, internal contradictions, and a lot of policy issues, policy conflicts, policy inconsistencies, environmental issues over the years that the current government is struggling to fix. And in fixing economic challenges, the central bank occupies a very prime of place. There are so many issues to address. The totality of what Dr. Kaduso was saying could still just be a drop in the ocean. Because as is often said, the devil is in the details. So, if we have to pick each economic aggregate in Nigeria as of today, dimension it, look at what the issues are, what are the problems, what need be done, one will almost end up producing a book.
I know that in that summit, either on the sidelines or somehow, your colleagues, yourself and your colleagues, you'd have spoken about the impression, how the message came through. Did it come across to you as though, well, did he hit the right notes? Did they think, oh dear, we have a mountain to climb?
Yeah, there were issues rightly addressed by Dr. Kaduso. Some identified some gaps in the address. Some identified the need to go further in explaining certain issues, especially certain developments in recent policy dimensions. So, of course, but the totality of it is that he recognized that there are problems and there is the urgent need to fix those problems. And of course, that the ultimate is the man on the street. What is the state of economic welfare of the man on the street? In economics, we will say that it is the end that justifies the means. So the challenge now is beyond rhetorics, moving from the talking to the walking.
Which of those
what happens?
Which of those statements or those policies you spoke about, which one stuck out, resonated deeper with you?
That there is need to pursue growth. Growth, that is economic growth, is a necessary but not sufficient condition for economic development. So there is need to transit from growth to development. I believe you recognize that. There is also the issue of the happenings in the foreign exchange market. Some, after the dinner, ask a pertinent question. Before the unification of exchange rate, we were on about 500 plus official, 800 plus the so-called black market. As of today, we're about 800 official, 1,100 black market. It raises a fundamental question. We used to have this 300 naira differential, which speculators used to play on, and which the president was so worried about when he took over. How could we create?
Which president? CIBN?
No. President of Federal Republic of Nigeria, which was the genesis of the unification of the exchange rates. So why should there be that disparity of 300 naira between the official and the black market? And some will get this foreign exchange allocation from the official, round trip to the black market, make 300 naira per dollar. And which tantamount to what we call economic rent. People earning without doing anything. But the question now is, if we have 800 as official and 1,100 as black market, the 300 naira differential is again there.
What was his answer?
No, it's not. It wasn't a question and answer. I'm just saying, you were asking me what were the reactions of people. So everybody was agitated that with the 300 naira still back, what are we going to do? What's the position of central bank, and what central bank doing to close that gap so that the old arbitrage opportunity, speculators cashing in on that differential to perform all sorts of unethical things in the foreign exchange market, and we are still having that differential today. What can be done to eliminate that so that the unification will help the economy? So that's still a gap.
Some members left with unanswered questions.
Exactly.
Very interesting to note, because just a day before, a colleague of mine, a colleague on a sister program, Sheon, had spoken with the current governor of Anambra State, who was also a former CBN governor.
Okay.
On the state. Exactly. Who was also a CBN governor, and he had asked him some questions with regards to the economy and what needed to be done. Well, Professor Soludo refused to give any. He was very adamant on speaking on what needed to be done, because he said that that's something that he will only give as advice behind the scenes to whoever is holding office. But he said something, and he said that the president inherited a dead economy. I do not know if you agree with him. Do you agree with him that this economy is dead?
The economy was. Don't know whether the word dead is the most appropriate, but the economy was in deep shit as at May this year. Professor Shasoludo happened to be a professor of economics. I'm a professor of economics. So you won't just drop a statement. Economics is science. Economics is statistics. Economics is facts.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the various macroeconomic aggregates. Where are we? And there are about 5 of them. Economic growth already declining, as the figures are showing now. I think we have that of second quarter now. Price stability. Inflation has been on the rise. Nigeria has one of the highest rate of inflation in Africa as of today. So there's no price stability. Unemployment of various types, reaching high heavens. Then the foreign exchange market in total mess, either in terms of the exchange rate. One of the other issues raised about the fish at the dinner was that nothing was said about the foreign exchange reserves. That is in concrete terms now. Where are we? If our foreign exchange management, because when the statutory power of the Central Bank of Nigeria says that it has responsibility for foreign exchange management, there are about 3-4 items under foreign exchange management alone. One is the foreign exchange rate. Two is foreign exchange reserves. Three is foreign exchange users. What are the uses? What are the authorized uses? 4, foreign exchange dealers. Who are the authorized dealers? Like, for example, what new look will do the change operation in Nigeria? Where we used to have about 5,000 of them, down to about 3,000 now. So the rules and regulations, because some of the abuses, they are coming from all these areas. So a whole gamut of it. So when you now look at these 5 macroeconomic indicators, and you cannot say any one of them.
We've listed 4 here: economic growth, price stability, unemployment, forex market, under forex market.
Balance of payment. Balance of payment position. That is our statement of account. Looking at Nigeria, our economic transactions, financial transactions with the rest of the world. What's the position? So those 5 things, I'm not sure any of them was in a state of comfort as at May this year. So if we are saying that the economy was in deep shit, total mess as at May, the facts support that assertion. But I won't say it's a dead economy, because a dead economy, a man is dead, you can't revive him.
Right. So maybe he was just comatose.
Comatose.
Okay.
State of disarray.
Okay, well, it's like my colleagues have questions for you, but just quickly before maybe we should go to Lagos first. Hi, Deanayo, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mokwe. We have with us here Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is founder and CEO of CPPE. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Truly
Thank you,
appreciate your time.
it's a pleasure.
Well, definitely we can't unpack everything that
Exactly.
CBN said, in this one program. But one of those very prominent issues is that of recapitalization of the banks.
Yeah.
They concern a number of people, experts such as yourself. Of course, you would expect that reactions have started. One of the major concerns a number of people have, okay, it's a fantastic idea. However, how about the risks of unemployment and other allied issues? How is there a need, for instance, to have conversations with labor in that regard? Because in everything that the CBN governor said, collaboration is very, very prominent in all of his conversations. It's not something one institution can do. There has to be collaborations across board. So in terms of the recapitalization, the risks of job losses are there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the recapitalization is something that is inevitable. The last time we had a minimum recapitalization or capitalization requirement was in 2005 under the then CBN governor, Professor Soludo. And at that time, I think for banks, the capital requirement or capitalization was 25 billion naira. Now, 25 billion naira in 2005 is not the same thing as 25 billion naira today. So apart from the issue that the CBN governor raised concerning our aspiration for 1 trillion naira economy, even if it's only to adjust for inflation and the value of money, there is a need to recapitalize. You talked about jobs. You need a stable financial and banking system to even preserve jobs. If you have a situation where the capital base has been massively eroded by inflation, I mean, 2005, the exchange rate was about 130 naira to the dollar. What's the exchange rate today? Just to illustrate how weak the situation has been as far as capitalization is concerned. So if you are talking about preserving jobs, you need to also ensure that the system is stable. You need to ensure that the banks have the capacity to manage the exposure that they are exposed to. Because as a bank, I mean, you give credit, you have all sorts of liabilities. If your capital base cannot support the liabilities you are carrying, you are putting the system at risk. Well, and if the system collapses, the job losses will even be more.
Well, a good number of experts such as yourself agree with the recapitalization and all, but one of the major challenges is in the process. Because you remember in 2005, some organizations didn't survive. Some banks went under, some banks couldn't, stabilize and all those things. So in the process, what are the things that you think need to be done in order for the capitalization process to be as successful as intended and achieve desired result long term? It's almost 20 years since the last one.
Yes, I think what needs to be done, or what needs to be done differently, is that we don't have to stampede the banks into it. What we had in 2005 was really unfortunate, because there was so much rush on the recapitalization, as if heaven would fall if we did not recapitalize at that time. The time frame was too short. I mean, how do you expect, maybe under a year, for banks to move from a capital base of 2 billion to 25 billion? Even the owners of banks at that time, the bank directors, they sought of audience with the then president Obasanjo that they needed more time. And I thought that should have been granted. But both Professor Soludo and Obasanjo were insisted that the deadline was not going to be shifted. That is what created the problem. Even banks that were doing well at their own level, some of them went under. Then you had all sorts of unholy, mergers and all of that. Some banks were acquired at very ridiculous terms. Some depositors lost their money. Employees lost jobs. Investors lost money. So I agree with you, the process is very important. We need to give them enough time, maybe a year, maybe 2, so that they can systematically migrate. And I must tell you that even as we speak, some of the banks have even improved on their capitalization voluntarily, because they knew that the way things were going, there was no way you could be talking about the 25 billion naira of 2005. It's almost 10 years. So it's a natural course of things. So the process has to be methodical. There has to be enough consultation, and I'm happy the new CBN governor has repeatedly talked about consultation, because you need to engage stakeholders so that you can do things in a very orderly manner without necessarily compromising your effectiveness as a regulator.
And I think it's quite instructive that he made these statements before the CIBN, and it speaks to the partnership you were talking about, because we know how major banks are in setting the tone for an economy. And there's a whole conversation around
and also
this.
that the fact that the announcement hasn't been made.
Indeed. He said that there are plans in motion. But 26 commercial banks, as it were, right now. We just had a few coming on stream. I don't know what you picture. Perhaps we'll ask Professor Ajibala, who was then with Intercontinental Bank. Perhaps you have something to say on this. But I'd like us to speak to something he also said, human condition. He talked about macro economy and all of those indices. But he said, as much as you pay attention to what affects, the big corporations, you also need to pay attention to what affects the average Nigerian. In fact, they will say the average Nigerian is doing well now. It is the below average Nigerian that we should talk about, the ones in poverty, the ones who cannot afford meals. And he said something quite instructive, price stability. Some of the front pages talked about that. Prices. How do we crash prices? And I'm talking tomatoes. I'm talking the everyday commodities, such that while the banks, of course, have their work cut out for them, they have their targets, the people also know what is the need for them right now. So what do we look at the CBN to do regarding price stability, if there is anything they can do anyway?
Well, let me take your first question first. You see, economic management at the end of the day is about human beings. And that is why I was really excited by that statement that he made. Economic reforms or economic policies are not ends in themselves. They are means to an end. And the end is to ensure the welfare of the people. So that is very important, that we should not just be looking at just the economic data, macroeconomic data. We should be looking at social data. And that speaks to the need to give policies a human face, to give economic reforms a human face. That That is the summary of what he was saying. But the truth is that, of course, he is part of the economic team. But it's not something the CBN alone can do. It has to be done in collaboration with the fiscal authorities. And I was happy again that at least he said, he underscored the importance of coordination between the fiscal and the monetary authorities. And interestingly, even the Minister of Finance was also at that dinner. That speaks to the kind of chemistry that we see going forward, between these two critical institutions. Now, you talk about price stability. Again, it's a question of how much we can get all the critical segments of economic players and policymakers to work together. The primary function of the Apex Bank, the central bank, is price stability, and he mentioned that. In addition to ensuring that we have, financial system stability and so on and so forth. And from what we have seen over time, practically all the key instruments of managing inflation has almost been exhausted by the CBN. We have the cash reserve requirement. Almost 32.5%. It's one of the highest you can find anywhere in the world. You have our monetary policy rate, 18.75%. It's also one of the highest. So if you have that and you have liquidity ratio, special debits and all of that. So already in terms of monetary policy tightening, which is the main instrument of the CBN, is already stretched. So the fiscal authorities, the issues of productivity, the issue of the structural issues, all of these things have to come into place. And of course, the issue of forex is also central to the inflationary issues we are talking about. The issue of energy cost. So there are quite a number of variables that are outside the control of the central bank.
It sounds to me like, all of the conversations we're having, as we said, it's just like some kind of, conversation starter, because each topic he mentioned is like a seminar topic on its own. But let's take a short break to continue right after this break. To stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Dr. Muda Yusuf is still with us this morning. Well, Kade was asking about those, the people who feel it the most. And we were just talking behind the scene about communities in Nigeria that we hardly give enough thought to. I had reason to go to the north many years ago, and the things that I saw are horrible, So when we talk about these realities that the CBN governor was referencing, they sound simplistic. They sound like it's just drama, so to speak. But the realities are somewhat talked about on the front page of This Nigeria this morning. We showed it earlier. That when Nigerians were asking the federal government to crash food prices now, even though the CBN governor spoke to them, the question newspapers guest asked was, who will do this? Who will crash food prices? Or maybe we should ask it better, how will food prices crash?
Well, the reality is that there is no quick fix to this, and there is no silver bullet. Food prices and the price of goods generally is a function of output. It's a function of production. It's a function of productivity. And it's a function of at what cost are you producing. These are the fundamental issues. Now, we have a challenge with food prices, for instance. What is the level of productivity in agriculture? Close to 90% of the domestic food we eat are still being supplied or produced by all these our peasant farmers. Unlike other sectors of the economy where we have been leveraging technology, we are not doing so much in agriculture, unfortunately. How much can the peasant farmers produce? The population is growing. The farming population is aging. Most of them are still using hoes and cutlasses. So increasingly there is a gap and there's a demand pressure. That is one. Secondly, we have this problem of insecurity. Even a good proportion of them that are even managing to do this production, many of them cannot go to farms. That's a security issue. So we have to deal with that. Third, some of them, even when they produce, how do they get it to the city, where the demand is even a lot more? Or how do they move from the farm to wherever the demand is? 90% of transportation needs today is by road. Either human movement or freight or movement of is by road. What is the state of the roads and what is the cost of fuel, the cost of diesel?
It sounds to me, Dr. Yusuf, you're saying that there is no end in sight, because the inflation figures we are talking about today, a significant chunk of it, a significant percentage of it, is as a result of food prices. So maybe we should ask, Dr. Our guest in Abuja, who is also there with us, Professor Ajibola. A significant chunk of the issues raised by Dr. Yusuf here is speaking to the challenge of food production. But inflation figures point to, first of all, a large chunk of it is as a result of the increase in fuel prices. And from what Dr. Yusuf is saying here this morning, it seems like there is no end in sight, given that we still have to deal with the insecurity issues, which the CBN governor also mentioned. So what do you see us doing to bring these both food prices and inflation figures down?
Yes, thank you, moderator, for that question. Let me speak from a position of knowledge. I'm a commercial farmer in my state, Ekiti State, precisely Ijero local government. I have a produce farm, and I process palm oil. I'm also into other food crops, yam, cassava, maize, and even a citrus farm. It's he who wears the shoe knows where it pitches. There are lots of problems confronting food production in our environment today. The president talked about food security, and we all applauded that policy dimension. And I could see how passionate our president is about food security. When we talk of poverty, if food problem could be addressed, the problem of poverty is almost fully solved. But as of today, there are still issues begging for solution as far as food production is concerned. Let's talk about the inputs. As of today, we are paying about 3 times the cost of basic farm inputs compared with what was the situation maybe about 2 years back. Herbicides, chemicals, even to pay labor to feed them, to process. Then, Dr. Muda Yusuf talked about even taking, number one is the storage. I can say from my own experience, about 30-40% of what we produce in the farm is wasted. Either due to problem of storage, problem of transportation, having to convey from the hinterland. In my own farm, for example, I constructed the road to the farm. That's about 5 kilometers. I provide my own water, my own power, my own storage, even to convey from the farm to the cities. You meet a myriad of problems along the road. Every truck carrying food is suspected, either by police, by road safety corps, by produce inspectors, by local government officials, by VIOs. By the time you even get to your destination, you are already selling at a loss. So we have to address the issue of farm inputs. How do we bring down the cost? How do we help the farmers in the area of storage, in the area of transportation, in the area of off-takers? We need to address all this. We've seen efforts in the past. Let me briefly mention one, Anchor Borrowers Program. But it was a misdirected policy because Central Bank of Nigeria, Tatu Chile, is not a bank for farmers. It's bankers' bank. It's banker to government. It's not a bank to any corporate entity. So for Central Bank to have disbursed the Anchor Borrowers Program by whatever name or alias to the farmers, that itself was a misnomer. No doubt, not much will come from that. Where we have Bank of Agric, Bank of Industry, Development Bank of Nigeria, all the microfinance banks around. So that perhaps would have helped. Then the issue of who are the beneficiaries of this kind of a program, this kind of incentives from the government side. I cited the example of the central bank.
Right.
Who are the beneficiaries? 100% were they farmers?
Well, Prof,
no doubt we are hearing that about 50%.
So
of
those
the
are
entire
major
anchor borrowers' loans remain uncollectible. So until we address some of these issues, we may continue to have these challenges of food security.
Well, Prof,
He also mentioned the issue of security of farmers. Let's look at what is happening in the middle belt. We often refer to as the food basket of Nigeria. Many could not go to the farms. So if we can help from the side of input, from the side of storage, from the side of off-takers, from the side of transportation, we'll be able to manage the cost and get the foods across to where consumption will take place. Because in economics, production is not enough. Distribution is important. Consumption is important.
But Prof, if I can come in now.
That is when the end will justify the means.
Right. And
finally,
you've raised some major
when we talk
issues.
About
Prof, just before you continue on that one, I just want to quickly come in here. You've raised some major issues, and they boil on the reality, especially of farmers, those who are trying to improve the indices of the nation, particularly inflation, because food prices is a major part of that. But I'd like to bring you to a point which was raised earlier, and I sort of want to connect the policies of government to the realities on ground, because the central bank governor talked about plans to increase the capital of banks. You've been in that sector before. How will this recapitalization improve, or how is it expected to improve the reality of farmers, for example? How is it expected to improve price stability? Do you think that this aligns with the reality on ground, particularly because you have experience in that field as well?
increasing the capitalization level of banks, the other guest has spoken about the need. The value of Naira as of today compared with 2005 has actually laid the foundation for such recapitalization. Let's not forget why the recapitalization then is because banks needed to be empowered to be able to handle some large size transactions on behalf of their customers. But with the level of capitalization then, it was impossible. But the way and manner it was done in 2005 brought together strange bedfellows. Good corporate culture was polluted. Corporate governance issues emerged. Those who ordinarily should be operating separately were forced together under mergers and acquisitions, whatever name you call it. Eventually, corporate governance practices were compromised in so many places. Then, some of us then, as at 2005, raised an objection to a 25 billion naira capitalization level for all banks. All banks need not be of the same size. That it should be staggered. It was refused. 5 years later, or about 6 years later, around 2011, what we advised in 2005 was now implemented by central bank. Now, categorizing banks into international, national, regional. What ought to have been done in 2005? And some very fine, well-run, well-cultured banks that were forced into unholy alliances in 2005 will have remained with us today. That advice was jettisoned. By the time we went back to that in 2011, it was too late. Now, let me come back to the issue of recapitalization and agriculture. Let's not forget, I manage an agricultural unit in one of my banks, precisely First Bank. The entire agricultural unit was reporting to me then. Orthodox banks, commercial banks, they don't find it easy to lend for agriculture because it's highly profitable. They hardly, in fact, we were recording almost half, almost 50% of not performing.
So the banking sector, the CBN, they have this information.
I'm talking, do that. You see, that's why I think that was indeed what led to the idea of this anchor borrowers program. Banks, orthodox banks, will not want to touch agriculture, even if they have their way with a loan pool. Because most times, I have operated my own agri farm for about 15 years. I've not broken even. I did not borrow from anybody. I have not broken even in 15 years. Supposing I've taken a loan, how will I pay?
So wait.
And that is the lot of so many agriculturists in this environment now. Either you talk about farming, either you talk about poultry, either you talk about any other thing.
So the solution is part of what you mentioned before. We address the off-taker and then put in place those
myriad of problems. It will help reduce the operating cost. But we are even talking about the role of banks. Now, it's extremely difficult. Banks will not see agriculture and those who are practitioners in agriculture as beautiful bride when it comes to looking for business. That is the truth of the matter.
So, Prof, talk to us about this.
So we then now need another outlet, another template, another architecture to support funding, financing of agriculture. I think that was the whole idea of the anchor borrowers program. Yeah. If banks are not ready, what can we do as a regulator? What can we do?
Should we have led to the agric bank?
I'm coming. So that was the idea, that let's fill this gap. These banks will ordinarily want to run, orthodox banks ordinarily want to run away from funding agriculture. How can we support? Then the idea of anchor borrowers program. But the question is, central bank lacks the capacity, either in terms of geographical spread, either in terms of human capital, to be able to see a program like anchor borrowers program through. So it ought to have been through a different outlet. For example, we are talking about recapitalization. If we are talking about agri, when are we going to recapitalize Bank of Agriculture?
Bank of Agriculture, then you also look at NERSA is another one.
Well, NISA again is a different ballgame, because the last we've heard about NISA, that they gave out about 280 billion naira, and almost the entire portfolio is bad, to the extent that the next National Assembly was asking NISA to write off the entire loan, because it was again under a very, very wrong template. We have all the microfinance banks out of over 1,000 license. Just between 200 and 300 are still alive. So those that are alive, why should NISA come on to start competing with them, chasing them out of business? So why couldn't such a template have, why couldn't those microfinance banks still exist, is still kicking?
So, Prof, if we understand what you're saying now, kind of even if we get these intervention banks or the new templates up and running, we can't do it without fixing those other problems you're talking about. We have to do all of them together.
It's not in silos. It's a basket. We must put all the issues in one basket and solve them simultaneously. Like, for example, provide me naira and kobo in my farm today. If you don't solve other problems, we are going nowhere. Money alone will not solve the problem. How much will I need to spend on processing? How much will I need to send looking for off-takers? You know, in those days, we used to have this marketing board that used to buy all these products from the farmers, so on and so forth. Yeah. We provide the storage facility, we provide stability in prices, and so all those things disappeared. So it's a fact, as a country, we need to sit down, ask fundamental questions beyond rhetorics. Ask fundamental questions. Who are the stakeholders? What are the roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder? Either in the area of financing, either in the area of off-taking, either in the... We used to have agric extension officers in those days. Even in banks, we used to have them. Who will liaise with all these farmers? Who will provide advisory services? Who will provide all the guidance and so on and so forth? Because however well-intentioned a farmer is, there are problems that will go beyond his...
Why were they in the banks? What were they doing? To advise on finance? The agric extension agents?
You know, when you have a farm, like I have a palm farm now, there are issues that are peculiar. So, palm produce. There are those who are specialists in that area. I might just have been a provider, a financier. I might not have that kind of knowledge. So, in those days, those we used to refer to as agric extension officers in the banks will visit the banks, look at the issues, provide advisory services, link them up with Ministry of Agriculture, link them up with other agencies of government, and so on and so forth, so that at the end of the day, it's win-win for everybody. That has disappeared. I've not seen any agric. My farm is known in my state. I've not seen anybody visiting my farm to say, what's happening there? What are you doing? What are your issues? What are your problems? What advice? Ordinary fertilizer you can get.
And this is a
and we are saying we are spending billions upon billions.
This is a sector.
To procure what?
A sector where both the federal government and the state government,
everybody, that's why I say all stakeholders,
where they both have, will I say, they have concurrent. What's that now? Yeah, they have concurrent participation, responsibility under the Constitution. So there are big questions to also be asked of state governments in terms of what it is that they are doing with agriculture, that sector. Because states are the ones that actually own the land.
Even local government.
Indeed.
Even local government.
No, well, local government, let us admit that it is not what it used to be or what it's supposed to be. So let us even say, okay, state government. Well, I'm just wondering, our problems, as you have stated, they're a myriad and they're lots. It's a lot. If we were to look at what part of it was self-inflicted and what part is as a result of macroeconomic indices, I'm sure the list is also going to be long. But maybe we'll take a break now, because I understand that we'll be going on break very, very soon. Okay, let us proceed then. I'm just looking at what part of it is self-inflicted and what part of it is as a result of macroeconomic indices. How big an influence would you say that the macroeconomic indices, the wars that are happening, and also the general inflation that's happening all over the world, what role does it really have to play on our economy?
Yes, macroeconomic indices. The word macro means large in economics. as opposed to micro, which is small. Macroeconomic indices affect everybody. That's the meaning. Either you talk of inflation, unemployment, talk of exchange rate, interest rate, they affect everybody. They are not fixed because of me and you. So it's for everybody. So if farmers, agriculturists, if they are operating within that macroeconomic setting, they cannot be insulated from happenings, either nationally or globally. So they were either victims or victors of whatever macroeconomic circumstances they find themselves. Because when we talk of inflation now, we are talking about increase in the prices of petroleum products. I pay for that. We talk about labor. I pay for that. I feed my workers in the farm. I buy chemicals and so on and so forth, most of which are imported. So there's imported inflation beyond the local inflation, domestic inflation. So all this affect the operations of operators in the agriculture, vis-a-vis other sectors of the economy. And funny enough, you know, there's what we call a consumer resistance in economics. Let me tell you, a keg of palm oil, 30 liters, the price as of today has not changed from the price as at this time last year. Yet, I am paying double or more than double to produce the same keg of palm oil as at today. Where do I go from there? So if you don't have compassion, if you don't have passion for agriculture in this, not only in this environment, anywhere in the world, if you are not passionate about agriculture, if you are looking for money, you are looking for the highest return on investment, who go to agri?
Are there any parts of it that are subsidized? Because we know that governments, you know, all over the world, they usually subsidize farmers. Is there any part of your production cost that is subsidized?
Well, to me, I don't know what others may want to say. There's hardly anyone I can see as of today.
Not seedlings, not...
That is directly, there's none that I can identify.
So why would you then say that at the end of the day, your finished product, which is what you sell, why have you left it at the same price?
Because of consumer resistance. Where is the money? Households are crying. The real purchasing power has gone down. So inside, you see, this is how it works in economics. When cost of production is increasing, and there's limit to which you can increase your prices, you have two options. Either you are operating at a loss, or you close down business, or you relocate. And if you look at what is happening within our environment, we've seen those three cases manifesting as of today. We've seen companies relocating. We've seen, what we have now with renewed interest in the economy and the solicitation for investment inflows, especially at the presidency level. We've seen years back now, companies relocating from Nigeria. Because if you are selling to a consumer who himself has no money, who himself is unable to buy, he will resist price increases. That's what is happening to...
We need to go to break, but we'll be back and get more perspectives on this matter. Stay on with us.